Hi, Jameson Mitchell here, and in this video I'm continuing my exploration of Howard's Grand Tableau with the focus this time on the diagonals. So stay tuned. And here we are, once again looking at Howard's Grand Tableau, and the deck that I'm using for this series is the Mystical Lenormand. It is by Regula Elizabeth Fiechter, and the artwork is by Trösch. And so in previous installments of this series, I looked at the overall impressions that I got when I first laid out the tableau. Then I looked at the cards that showed us what the general advice being offered was the first three cards in the line. Then I looked at the cards that made up the four corners and I read those. And in the last video I looked at the cards that surrounded the Significator, which is my friend Howard. I looked at the cards that were above him, below him, behind him, and before him. And I should say that if you're new to this series is designed for two reasons. Number one, it allowed me, when I first started working with Lenormand, to do Grand Tableau for a friend of mine, just so I can get my feet wet and get my bearings doing it. And so my friend Howard volunteered to have a reading done on him, and his situation at the time we did the reading was that he was working on his Akashic Records Consultant practice, and he was looking for people to offer his services to, and he was finding the experience to be quite challenging. And so we looked at that, and so it served him because it gave him information, and it served me because it gave me experience. The other reason for doing this series is because I had previously done a video on the Grand Tableau, because I had some viewers of my channel ask me about how I read the cards in context to the card being in the houses. And then after I did that video, there was a follow-up request to look at the cards in houses with more detail, so I've been more mindful of breaking this up into parts. So each part of the process of my work with the Grand Tableau has consisted of one video, but within that video I've been more mindful of explaining how I read cards in houses. So in this particular video, as I said in the intro, we're going to be looking at the diagonals. And so in this particular case, we're going to be looking at the diagonals that lead to the Significator. So this is the Significator, this is Howard the gentleman. And the Significator has cards that are leading to it. So the key and the mountain are the diagonal that's leading to it. And cards that are leading to the Significator represent past intentions and influences. So there's one way. And then we have one card in the diagonal that's leading to Howard this way, which is the anchor. And then you also want to keep in mind the cards that are leading from the Significator, forming the other diagonal leading out. And so they would be on the right side. So here we have one card here, the mice, which is leading one way, and then we have the dog, which is leading another way. So if you're going to use this technique, and I will say that the diagonal technique is not one that you have to use. As I'm going through this series, I think that some techniques are going to be more important and more relevant than others. I tend to want to milk a Grand Tableau for everything I can get out of it, so I use every technique I can. And sometimes you'll find that the more techniques you use, they reinforce or repeat information, which is good. You want to have information and messages that repeat. I think that's great. And especially when you get the same message in a different route or different way. But when you're looking at the diagonals, you always want to, the past leads to the Significator. So you always want to start with the top of the diagonal and work your way to the Significator card. And that goes both when it's at the top and both when it's at the bottom. And then when you're looking at the future, you want to start with the card that leads away from the significator and work your way out. So again, to means that you're coming to the significator, and from means you're leading away from the significator. So just want to throw that out there. So here in our example, in this reading, like I said, we have key and mountain leading to Howard's card, the significator, the gentleman, and so this represents the past. So the easiest way to read the pair is, and I should say, it forms a pair, so you would read the top card as being the first card in the line, and then each card following it would be the next card in the line, and you would read it that way. So key would be first, and then mountain. So here we have in the past the discovery, because I read key as discovery. It can represent a discovery, it can represent a revelation, it could represent a breakthrough, it could represent the answer or solution to something, something being certain. I always see the key as a yes card. So it represents something vital, something important, something that is certain though. And it could be like the truth of the situation. So it's acknowledging that the discovery of a challenge, because the mountain is a card that represents challenges, it represents obstacles, it represents blocks. So I'm seeing that. So the most immediate thing that jumps out at me here is the discovery of a challenge, which is what the situation is. When he brought the situation to me, he was in a challenging time, and he was also looking for answers. So it could be like the answer to a challenge. You know, the answer, another way of looking at the mountain for me, is about a setback or a delay. So it could be like the answer to a setback or delay for the man. You know, if you can include the man, you don't have to include the man, you would just read the card. So I'm looking at this as the discovery of a challenge for the man, or the answer or solution to a setback or delay for the man. Now, going with the houses add another flavor to it. So key is in the house of tree. So tree for me represents growth and development. So I'm reading this card, the key here, and this that is telling Howard that the growth and development that he would like to see for his business is certain. However, if you look at the image, and again, this is not a Lenormand technique, but if you look at the image, there's an egg that's cracking. So it could be, you know, it's just a matter of time before it hatches. You know, the key is there. It just has to grow and develop. So with all businesses, you just have to allow it time to grow and develop. And I think that's what the emphasis with the tree is, because the tree is something that grows and develops, but it takes time and requires patience. So it could say here for him that the key is patience. The growth and development is certain, but patience is the most important thing right now. And that in time, he will get the answer. Just the answer. He'll have some sort of discovery, he'll have some sort of revelation, he'll have some sort of breakthrough, but it's going to take time. The other thing that I'm seeing with that is that it's telling him that it's important, because the key for me represents something important, but it's important for him to develop connections and to branch out. Again, those are elements of the tree. So because the key is in the space or the energy of the tree. So I'm seeing that. Now, if we go one card down to mountain, mountain is in the house of the fox. And so now the fox can be seen as a challenging card, but in this regard, I'm going to look at it in its favorable side for me, which is that it's a card that can represent job, work, and self-employment. So here, the mountain is in that kind of energy, the energy in the space of self-employment, because that's what this is. This is a self-employment venture for Howard. Then it could just simply say that he has now realized or discovered the challenges of self-employment. You know, he's realizing now, this is behind him, he's realizing now that this is not as easy maybe as he thought it was going to be. It could also be with the idea of mountain being a delay or a setback, that, you know, there may be a reason why he's experiencing this challenging setback. It could be that it's allowing him maybe to develop his skill more. You know, maybe he has to get more training, or, you know, become more disciplined or something. The mountain is there for a reason. So things just don't get put on hold, or a setback or delay is caused. There's a reason for it. If you're willing to look beyond the challenge itself and say, okay, how is the challenge supporting him? It could be that it's going to give him the space of time to develop his skill more, because now remember, this is in the energy of Fox, and Fox can represent not just employment or self-employment, it can also represent one's craft and one's skill and skill set. So it could be like there's a delay because he needs to be working on developing his skill more. That's just a possibility. So those are energies behind him. And then the last one behind him would be looking at the anchor. And so now the anchor is another work-related card, and it represents hard work. It represents a stable work. It represents routine work. So here behind him, it could be the idea that he understands that this venture that he has started is going to require a lot of hard work, or he has to be more serious or serious-minded about it than he has been. And it could also say, too, that when he started it out, that he was very hopeful, because I tend to look at Anchor as a card of hope. And it's also about perseverance and persistence. So it could be, him just being persistent. Now, I'm also seeing this in the House of the Lilies, and so the lilies can represent things like something old, something from the past. It could be something that's mature. It can be some sort of experience. So it's making me look at like part of the challenge, and maybe part of the reason why he's looking for business to be growing, developing really quickly, could be based on his own past experience, maybe as an employee with the energy of the fox, where it was more routine. He had a work history that was more stable and secure. And here's a challenge. That's a challenge with being an employee and being self-employed, is that depending on whatever your business is, there may be cycles where there's a lot of work coming in, and there may be cycles where not so much. And that becomes a lifestyle change, and that could upset your sense of stability and security when it's not routine. And so that could be some other energy that he is experiencing with this. So I'm seeing that with Anchor in the House of the Lilies. So now looking to the right, now if you've been following the series, this is the column that represents the future, and there's not that much there. So when we're looking at the future influences and intentions, there's not going to be that much information there. But what's there is still going to be important and relevant. So first we have mice. If we're going to the card that's away from him, or leading from him, the first one we have is the mice. So the mice represent stress, worry. It can represent something that is being diminished or lessened over time. It doesn't happen right away. It's happening over a long period of time. So I'm seeing that kind of energy. And so going with that, mice is in the House of Stars. And so stars is a card that represents inspiration. It represents guidance and direction. So I'm seeing the possibility here with this set is that it could talk about the possibility in the future of a loss of inspiration, or that inspiration becomes lessened or diminished over time. Like, so the longer he has this challenge, it could impact the future of his sense of being inspired by it. So there's that possibility. It could also be that there will be future worry or stress about the future of the direction of the business. If he just sees a continual decline, let's say with the mice, in terms of interest, then that would make him really worried and possibly stressed about the future of the venture. So I'm seeing that as a possibility. And then the last card here in this exercise is the dog. And the dog represents help. It represents support. It represents trust. It represents loyalty. So it's in the house of the moon. So I'm seeing that as a career related thing. Now remember, and this is part of his question about where the future is going with this. And so Moon represents things like career, it represents reputation, it represents a sense of recognition. So I'm seeing this as a possibility that in the future, if he works through the possibility of a loss of inspiration over time, if he maybe shifts his focus from this to this could be possibly building a reputation for being helpful and supportive in the work as an Akashic Records consultant. It could also be too that, the most obvious thing would be having a career as a consultant, so it would be like, especially if he really dedicates himself to the hard work, the serious hard work of building a practice, a business, which takes time, and he doesn't give up hope, and he's persistent and perseveres, then this would suggest a career as a consultant, because I always see the dog in terms of professions, as either being an advisor or a consultant. And then the last thing, because I'm looking at the image and I see the dog here with a crystal ball, it could be just Howard in the future working on his level of trust and faith in the guidance that he gets from his guides, because that could be playing on the idea that the dog is like a guide dog, or a seeing eye dog, the imagery is playing upon on that. So just for him to continue to have faith and trust in the guidance he's getting from his guides, and in this particular case, as I said before, that since he is an Akashic Records consultant, work with the record keepers, the masters, in building the business. Part of it could be him working on a routine of being in his records all the time and having his record keepers advise him, going with the dog energy, advise him on how to move forward with the business, how to build the business. I have learned as a Reiki practitioner that when you are setting up your business, and this is a different modality, but the analogy is the same. When you're building your business with your modality, you want to have the modality be a part of the process. So I have heard various Reiki practitioners, I'm one, but I don't, it's not a big part of my business, but for those who have made Reiki into a successful business, they invited Reiki to be a part of the business process. So, I do the same thing. When I am looking at the cards about business-related issues, as a diviner, as a card reader, I make the cards part of the practice. So when I'm looking about how to build my business and doing strategic things and all that other kind of stuff, I always consult the cards, because that is a huge part of the business. So why not invite that energy in? It would be the same thing here. Howard would have to really strongly be mindful of bringing the record keepers and the masters into this situation. That's his team. The dog is about partners and companions. Those are his partners and companions in business. So he needs to be actively seeking their guidance. So this has been looking at the diagonals in a grand tableau. And in our next video in this series, we will be looking at another optional technique, and that is called knighting. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope it has been informative. And until our next video together, I wish you all a great day and take care.